Hello and welcome to Dawn Chorus Writes, a Miraculous Ladybug Fanfiction. Welcome back to Sweet Treats. This is part 2. If you haven't listened to part 1, I would highly recommend it, and the link to the video is down below in the description. And make sure you smash that like button, subscribe for part 3, and comment down below where you think it's going to go next. Okay, so I hope you enjoy. Sweet treats. Sweet Treats, Part 2. Adrien's POV. Adrien felt a tingle trickle through his hand and noticed a hint of pink on Marinette's cheeks. She was sweet for doing this for him. She poured another gulp of maple syrup onto her pancakes as she watched in envy. Do you want some? Pancakes aren't the same without syrup. She held the jug out in front of him, and he could smell the caramelized sugar tempting him. She raised an eyebrow at him, daring him. He was spending the day baking cakes. He might as well start on the sugar train now. Yes, please. His eyes widened as the golden liquid poured down over the blueberries and soaked into the pancakes. He took an enormous spoonful, barely containing it in his mouth, causing Marinette to burst out laughing and him to choke slightly with a chuckle. Blushing, he realized how nice this was, sitting around the table and having breakfast together. His father might be one of the wealthiest men of Paris, but this was priceless to him. Sabine gave him a warm smile as she gazed from her daughter to him, who seemed overjoyed at having a friend round. I'm going to go and take Tom some breakfast. Sabine placed her own plate on the side whilst loading the rest of the goodies from the table onto a separate plate for her husband. You two have fun, and you know where we are if you need anything. Thanks, my mum. We might need to use some ovens. We'll see how we get on. Are you finished? Marinette paused, leaning over him for his plate. Adrien nodded, surprised at how nervous he got at her closeness. She grabbed hers and Adrien's plate, putting them next to the sink as he cleared the rest. Adrien watched Sabine shut the door behind her, aware of them being alone together, but Marinette didn't seem fazed by it, when she normally would be. Would you like some tea? I've got strawberry and raspberry, or lemon and ginger? She turned round with the kettle in her hand, rolling her bottom lip between her teeth. Cute. Or I can see if there are some other kinds. She placed the kettle back on the worktop and raked through the top cupboards, reaching up on her tippy toes, causing Adrien to chuckle at the adorable scene in front of him. He hadn't realised how petite Marinette was sometimes. I think strawberry and raspberry will be nice, thank you, Adrien said, trying to hide the light laughter in his voice. Marinette let out a sigh of relief, followed by a giggle of embarrassment. I think you'll enjoy it. It tastes like summer. Adrien stood awkwardly behind Marinette, leaning against the counter, fiddling with a rogue tuft of hair at the back of his neck. He smiled to himself as she did a little dance across the kitchen, a move she must have done countless of times as she cooked and baked and helped her parents. But this time she was performing unaware of her actions, and he wasn't going to tell her and stop the show. What was he feeling? He had been aware for a while now that his friendship with Marinette was important to him, more important than any other. He wanted to chat to her about the small things, that he wanted to do nice things for her to make her smile, that he needed to be near her. When did his feelings of friendship for Marinette develop to this? And what was this? We can let that brew whilst we get the ingredients out. Her voice brought him back out of his head and back into the room. Great! Adrien did a small jump in the air and rubbed his hands together like an excited child. Marinette giggled at the scene in front of her. You're acting like you've never baked a cake before. Embarrassed, he paused, rubbing his hands across his arm protectively. Well, I haven't. This would be my first one. Oh, really? You never baked cupcakes with friends or birthday cakes for your... Her gaze was soft on him, feeling exposed. That's all right. I'll take you through the steps. It's simple, really. You just have to follow the rules and think of it like chemistry. You're good at that subject. Oh, is the cake going to change colour, bubble, or explode? He raised his eyebrows at her, shifting the intimate mood that was forming oh so easily. I hope not. Marinette burst out laughing at the image. No, she said with a playful jab on the arm, taking him by surprise. More like getting the measurements right and following the method. Okay, Master Mari, share your knowledge onto me. He stretched his arms out and bowed at her. He knew he was showing a little shat in his actions, but it felt good to show his friends his more playful side. Oh, you're such a dork. She laughed, turning her back to him, and took ingredients out of the cupboards. Can you grab the milk and the eggs out of the fridge for me? She pointed across the kitchen. As you wish, Master Mari, he tried to say in a voice he had heard in one of his animes, causing Marinette to burst out laughing, falling backwards as she tried to pull herself up from one of the bottom cupboards. The bowls scattered across the floor as Adrien quickly raced to her side. I'm so sorry. What was that voice? Marinette tried to talk while still laughing. Adrien felt a wave of relief come over him and grinned down at her. He held out his hand, attempting to pull her up. A character I'd seen in a show? She slid a little, trying to get her balance as Adrien grabbed an arm around her. Well, if I'm Master, then we'll need to come up with a name for you, she teased, blushing slightly. He was still holding on to her close against him. You mean as a nickname? I've never had one before. That would be cool. Realizing how close their faces were to each other, they both took a step back and began picking up the equipment that had dispersed across the kitchen floor, then piling them up under the counter for a quick wash. We'll have to think about this carefully. Marinette had the same puzzling expression as she does when she's working on a design problem. She narrowed her stare at him whilst puckering her lips together and rolling them between her teeth all at once. How can she be this cute? Well, I'm kind of like an apprentice, so maybe... like Mickey Mouse in Fantasia. He could tell she was joking with him, but he really liked that film. Oh, really? I'm going to be the one tidying up? With me around being a klutz, she chuckled, holding the bag of flour and almost dropping it. See what I mean? Adrien couldn't help but laugh. He admired that about Marinette. She embraced who she was with no shame, whilst he was scared to show the more natural side of his personality. At home, he had to be quiet, hidden, a high-achieving student. To the public, he was an image of perfection, a model for everyone to admire and want to be. But for one day, he was going to be proud to be himself. So what, my nickname is Mickey? He held up 2 rolls from the side and arranged them above his head, catching Marinette off guard, bursting into laughter once more and almost tipping over the sugar this time. You will in a minute if I make any more mess, she said, trying to regain her breath. His stomach ached at his side for laughing. This felt amazing. Master Mari, what would you like me to do first? Mickey, you can do the washing up whilst I lay out the ingredients before it lands on the floor. She gave him a smirk as he dropped his gaze in a mocking, sad pout. Stop making me laugh, she said through a chuckle and bopped her hip against his, causing him to let out a surprised laugh before returning the favour. After the tasks were done, Adrien stood next to Marinette and stared at all the ingredients out in front of him. I was thinking we could make the cake first, as it needs to cool before we decorate it. The idea made Adrien's eyes brighten. Once they are in the oven, we could make the cookies to decorate, or cupcakes. What do you think? She turned her attention to Adrien, giving him a soft smile. I don't know. You're the master, he said, sounding a little nervous and making the wrong decision. But they will be your gift to him, she said, giving him an encouraging smile. Well, I thought we can go joint on the gift, since we are both making them for him. You're right, I suppose we are. Joint gifts. He gazed over at her and surprised to see her blushing at his words. Since we are baking a big cake, then we could make sugar cookies to decorate? How if we make them round and turn them into records, like DJ records? Is that silly? He rubbed the back of his neck and quickly glanced at Marinette. That's perfect, Adrien. See, we'll make you a baker yet. He blushed at the compliment and the kind gesture of her patting his back in small circles, finding himself missing it when she stopped. You might want to wait and taste them before you give me an official offer to join, they both chuckled. We better get started then. She placed one of the large mixing bowls in front of Adrien and a smaller measuring one in front of herself. Can you hand me the butter, please, Mickey? She said, trying to keep a neutral tone and a straight voice. Of course, master. He presented it to her with a deep bow and a wide grin. This was fun, already. She measured out the amount and placed it into the bowl in front of Adrien and handed him the wooden spoon. What am I? You mix it together once I've added the sugar. She poured out the amount and tipped the glittering crystals over the golden butter. Wow, that's a lot of sugar. No wonder my father doesn't want me to eat cake. Adrien's eyes widened as he watched Marinette. Yes, but it tastes so good. She let out a cheeky laugh and then shot him a look that made his heart flutter. Taking a deep breath, Adrien looked at the ingredients with a worried expression and stabbed at the butter. Is this how? It doesn't seem to mix. Marinette cracked the 4 eggs into a bowl and glanced at Adrien, trying her hardest not to laugh. She quickly washed her hands and stood behind him. Try doing this. She leaned over him and placed her hand on top of his and guided it around the bowl, using the edge of the spoon to press the sugar and butter together. He suddenly felt hot and flustered with her hand touching his. Yep. He turned his face next to Marinette's. Watching her focus on the task made him smile. Quickly aware of what she was doing, she blushed, letting go and jumped back. You have a go. Her voice was a higher pitch than normal as she turned her back to him, grabbing a fork from the drawer. The pair worked as an excellent team, Marinette measuring and Adrien mixing, without any additional help to his disappointment until the batter was formed. She laid out the 2 silicone molds and poured the velvet smooth batter into each. They will take 40 minutes to bake. She set the cheeky counter onto the worktop, which means we have time to clean down and start the sugar cookies. Thank you, Master Murray. This has been amazing. He gave her a little bow. We're not finished yet, Mickey. She gave him a little smirk. So what's next? Oh, you can do the dishes while I get the ingredients out for the cookies? She handed him a dishcloth and gave him a wink, holding back the laughter. Mickey is right. He ripped the dishcloth out and hit her by accident across the top of her legs. She spun round, her eyes wide. She whipped him back with the tea towel catching his hip. Is that how it is? She couldn't help herself getting into a power stance and held the towel between her hands. Adrien, with a broad grin, grabbed his dishcloth and stood opposite from her, seeing who dared go first. They stared at each other as if it was high noon and their hands on the pistol. Adrien was the first to fling the cloth, with Marinette weaving out of the way, and before he knew it, she was whipping hers across the air and catching him on the legs. Both of them couldn't control their laughter as he jumped around the kitchen chasing each other until Marinette slid on some flour and went flying to the floor with a thud. First came the laughter, followed by the red in her cheeks and a small moan. Adrien, still chuckling, held out his hand to her and pulled her up. "Are you all right?" She nodded, looking bashful and adorable, he thought. "I think we had better start on the cleaning up. Truce for now?" Giving her a sideways glance that made her laugh again. He couldn't think of a time that he had this much fun and laughed so hard. They made the cookies in a similar manner as the cake. Marinette measured out the ingredients while Adrien mixed it together. They had finished making the dough in time for the chicky timer to go off. The cakes cooled off on the side whilst they cut out the circles and placing them onto the baking tray. "We make a great team," Adrien commented as he added another circle to a row along the bottom. "We do, don't we?" She rolled her lips between her teeth again, followed by a soft smile that spread into her eyes. Adrien darted his gaze away from her, feeling the warmth inside of him reach his cheeks. "What's next, master?" "Normally we would chill the cookies before putting them into the oven, but..." She glanced over at the clock and they only had a few hours left to the party and they still needed to decorate them. "I think we'll have to take a chance and place them in now. They do say it's the thought and love that counts." "I'm sure they'll be fine. There has been a lot of love placed into these," he said, not holding her gaze, and placed the dishes next to the sink. "I suppose Mickey will do the dishes again?" Marinette moved over to the couch and handed out a game controller. "Best out of 3? "You're on!" Adrien grinned, jumped down next to her. Could this day get any better? Thank you for listening to part 2 of Sweet Treats. Make sure you look out for part 3 coming soon, early on next week. And make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe so you don't miss out, and comment down below of what you think of it so far and where it's going to head. And thanks for listening. Bye.